They called him the Quiet One, the soul behind the Bee Gees' haunting harmonies, the man who could make heartbreak sound like heaven. But behind that gentle voice was a secret life, one that nearly tore apart the family he built and the legacy he left behind. For years, Robin Gibb sang about love, love lost, love found, love betrayed. But few knew that his own story mirrored those songs more than anyone realized. While the world adored his voice, his home life began to unravel, slowly, quietly, until a shocking revelation came out in public, and the headlines didn't sound like lyrics anymore. It wasn't about fame or money or music, it was about trust, and what happens when that trust is broken inside a family known for harmony. The press called it scandal, his fans called it confusion, and Robin, he called it love. But love, in his world, wasn't simple. It was tangled in secrecy, guilt, and forgiveness, and one decision changed how his family saw him forever. So what really happened inside the Gibb household when the microphones were off and the spotlight turned cold? And was it truly love, or a dangerous kind of loneliness that led Robin Gibb to risk it all? Let's uncover the truth, the verified, the whispered, and the rumored, behind one of music's most private heartbreaks. You're watching RetroWaves, where we uncover the stories the music never told, the secrets behind the songs, and the emotions behind the stars. If you love real stories about legends like Robin Gibb, Barry, and the artists who shaped the sound of generations, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because here on RetroWaves, the past still sings, and sometimes it cries. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Robin Gibb seemed to have it all. The Bee Gees were music royalty again, respected by younger artists, honored with awards, and loved by fans across generations. At home, he appeared settled. He'd been married to Dwina Murphy Gibb since 1985, a former Druid priestess, artist, and writer. Together, they shared a life that many described as unusual, even by rock star standards. In interviews, Dwina spoke about being open-minded, allowing Robin his individual freedom. To some, it sounded romantic, to others, risky. She once hinted that their marriage had space for creativity and companionship beyond the ordinary. That was her phrasing, and it raised eyebrows even then. Behind the smiles, something else was quietly unfolding. A woman named Claire Yang, sometimes spelled Claire in reports, was hired to help care for Robin and Dwina's Oxfordshire estate. She was kind, quiet, and always nearby. Too nearby, some noticed. Years later, the truth surfaced. Claire Yang was more than just an employee. She and Robin had been involved in a private relationship, and from that relationship came a child, a little girl named Snow Evelyn Robin Juliet Gibb, born in 2008. That part is verified, confirmed through legal records and publicly acknowledged by the Gibb family after Robin's passing. But what no one outside that circle could agree on was how long the affair had gone on and who knew about it. Tabloids turned it into drama. Headlines shouted betrayal, while others described Dwina's reaction as spiritual acceptance. Yet even that is partly rumor, because no major interview ever captured Dwina's exact feelings. What she did confirm, years later, was that she and Robin shared a deep bond that survived even the most difficult moments. So was it forgiveness or quiet heartbreak? Only those walls knew the answer. Still, fans couldn't help asking, how could the man who sang "How Deep Is Your Love" find himself in a story that sounded more like too much heaven for one man to handle? Behind every melody he wrote, there seemed to be pain, and now the world wondered if that pain had finally broken through the songs and into his life. The stage lights dimmed, but the questions burned brighter than ever. And the next chapter of Robin Gibb's story would prove that even legends can lose control of the harmony they fought to protect, because the affair and the daughter were only part of what shocked those closest to him. There were other whispers, the kind that spoke of something deeper, something that could have changed how the world remembered him completely. And those whispers, they weren't about another woman. They were about a secret some claimed he took to the grave. It started as a whisper, the kind that follows fame like a shadow. At first, no one believed Robin Gibb could be involved in something so personal, so human, so ordinary. He was a legend, a man who sang to millions, yet seemed untouched by scandal. But when the news broke that Robin had fathered a child with his housekeeper, Claire Yang, the whisper became a storm. Papers across Britain printed the story, often with photos that looked stolen, captions that felt cruel. And while the story shocked the world, what stunned people most was Robin Gibb's reaction. She didn't rage publicly. She didn't seek revenge. In fact, she said something that no one expected, that she and Robin had a special understanding. To many, that sounded like forgiveness. To others, it sounded like heartbreak disguised as calm. Rumors swirled that their marriage had long been open, that Robin, who was known to practice Druidic traditions and advocate for spiritual freedom, had accepted Robin's need for companionship beyond marriage. But again, that remains unconfirmed. There are no verified statements from either Robin or Robin explicitly describing such an arrangement. Only hints, interpretations, and quotes taken out of context by tabloids looking for fire where there might have only been smoke. Still, in the quiet of their Oxfordshire home, there was one truth no headline could deny. A child had been born. Her name was Snow Evelyn Robin Juliet Gibb, and she carried the name of her father, the man whose songs defined love for an entire generation. To Robin, she was innocent, a miracle born out of mistake perhaps, but one he loved dearly. Yet to those around him, that love came at a cost, one that would ripple through his family, his reputation, and even his final years. Because this wasn't just about betrayal, it was about a man torn between guilt and affection, between the family he built and the one he didn't expect. And that's where the real heartbreak began. After the affair became public, Robin's household was never the same. Some close to the family claimed Claire Yang had grown attached, believing Robin would leave his wife. Others said she remained respectful even after the truth came out. What's verified is that Robin continued to live with his wife Duina at their Tam estate. Claire, meanwhile, was given a house nearby, allegedly bought by Robin for her and their daughter. That part was later confirmed through estate records after Robin's death in 2012, but it wasn't the property that made headlines, it was the silence. Neither Robin nor Duina ever publicly denied the relationship. They didn't give interviews to justify it. They simply carried on, as if love, in all its messy forms, was still worth protecting. However, whispers persisted about whether Robin and Duina had other private arrangements. Some gossip columns claimed Duina had her own partners, suggesting a mutual understanding. But again, this was never verified. What is confirmed is that Duina once described herself as bisexual in a past interview and spoke about honoring love in all its forms. That statement alone gave tabloids fuel to imagine their marriage as something unconventional. But love, in any form, is still fragile, and Robin's health began to decline around this time. Friends later said he carried deep guilt, that even as he smiled on stage, his private heart was heavy. He worried about his children, about how they'd see him one day, and as one insider later shared, Robin was the kind of man who could sing about pain, but couldn't always talk about it. By 2010, his world had grown smaller, his brothers were gone. His marriage was strained, and the little girl he had late in life reminded him every day of both joy and consequence. That's when the rumors, the other kind, began, the ones that didn't just question who Robin loved, but how. Somewhere between admiration and curiosity, the tabloids began to whisper something else. That maybe, just maybe, Robin Gibb's heart had another secret. One he'd hidden far longer than anyone knew, a rumored gay affair, as the headlines later called it. But here's the truth. There is no verified record, no documented evidence, and no credible source confirming that Robin Gibb had a gay relationship. Every story that claimed otherwise came from anonymous insiders, tabloid columns, or speculative blogs published after his death, not from those who actually knew him. So why did people believe it? Because Robin's personality was gentle, sensitive, and deeply emotional, qualities that the press, in their ignorance, often labeled as mysterious. He wasn't loud or dominant like some rock stars. He was introspective. He wrote about vulnerability, and in the public imagination that became a blank canvas for speculation. Still, it's important to note, Robin Gibb was a deeply private man. Even his verified affair with Claire Yang only came to light when it could no longer be hidden. So when people whispered about his sexuality, it said more about the culture around him than about him. In a world obsessed with secrets, silence becomes its own story. But whether true or not, the whispers hurt the people who loved him most. His wife, his children, even his loyal fans. They all watched as gossip replaced grief and rumors replaced remembrance. Because as Robin's health declined, He faced something far more serious than public scandal. He faced his own mortality, and in those final years, surrounded by the people who still loved him, despite everything, the man behind the music found himself fighting for peace, forgiveness, and time. But how did Robin Gibb, one of the greatest voices of his era, spend his last days, and who truly stood by him when the cameras were gone? That's where his real story begins, and where his final secret is finally revealed. By 2010, Robin Gibb was a man fighting on two fronts, against the tabloids outside and his own body within. He was diagnosed with colorectal cancer, which later spread to his liver. At first, he told friends he believed he could beat it. He had always seen himself as resilient, the survivor of brothers lost too soon. But as his health began to fade, the strong, confident Robin people remembered from the stage slowly disappeared. Yet something unexpected happened during this time. Robin Gibb never left his side. Despite everything, the affair, the child, the gossip, she cared for him with quiet loyalty. Visitors often recalled seeing her by his hospital bed, reading to him, holding his hand, and keeping the world outside at bay. Whatever pain had existed between them seemed to fade into something stronger, compassion. Even Barry Gibb, his last surviving brother, once said that Robin lived for love. It wasn't an exaggeration. To Robin, love was complicated, flawed, but still sacred. And as he weakened, those who visited noticed how soft his voice had become, not just physically, but emotionally. He spoke often about his family, about forgiveness, and about the importance of staying close. In interviews, Robin later revealed that during those final months, Robin wrote poems, sometimes at night when he couldn't sleep. One of them ended with the line, "Even when the music stops, the heart must still keep time." It was haunting, and it left many wondering, was he writing to his wife, his daughter, or perhaps both? Because even in illness, the dual life he led still lingered in the background. Some reports claim he arranged financial provisions for his daughter Snow to ensure she'd be cared for after his passing. That's verified. His estate records confirm trust allocations that mentioned her by name. But beyond money, what he wanted most was something harder to give: peace between the two worlds he loved. When Snow Evelyn Robin Juliet Gibb was born in 2008, few could have imagined how symbolic her name would become. Snow, the sign of purity and forgiveness. Evelyn, meaning wished for child. Robin Juliet, after the father who, in his own way, wanted her to have both his name and his love. For a while she lived quietly with her mother, Claire Yang, in a home near the Gibbs' Tame estate, reportedly a property Robin bought for them. This is confirmed through property records published in British media after his death. Still, the arrangement was never simple. Rumors claimed that Robin allowed Robin to visit Snow privately, but avoided public appearances together. However, no verified interviews or family statements confirm that. It remains speculative. What's certain is that Robin remained involved in Snow's life until his final year. Friends said he often spoke about her with tenderness, calling her his miracle child. To some that was bittersweet, because it reminded them that even the greatest artists can't escape human contradictions. Robin once told an interviewer that he believed in destiny, that everything in life, even the hard things, happens for a reason. Those who knew him best said that belief carried him through the chaos. By 2011, his health had worsened. He was in and out of treatment, his body thin but his spirit somehow intact. And as he spent more time at home, surrounded by family, it was said that he and Robin began to speak openly again, not as husband and wife trapped in a scandal, but as two souls who had shared a lifetime of music, mistakes, and meaning. One friend later recalled seeing the two holding hands during one of Robin's last public outings. "They didn't speak," the witness said. "They just smiled at each other. It was like forgiveness without words. It wasn't the ending the tabloids expected, it was the one Robin seemed to choose." In May 2012, Robin Gibb passed away at age 62. The news stunned the world. For fans, it was the end of an era. For his family, it was the closing of a complicated, beautiful, and painful chapter. At his funeral, Robin stood at the front of the St. Mary's Church in Thame, dressed in white. She didn't cry in public, at least not visibly, but witnesses said her hands shook as she read a poem she'd written for him. The poem wasn't about betrayal or sorrow. It was about light, eternity, and the hope that love never truly ends. In a way that said everything. Later, reports surfaced that Claire Yang and Snow were not present at the main ceremony, but paid their respects privately. That's verified through multiple media outlets at the time, including BBC and The Guardian. After the service, Robin's coffin was carried through the streets while Bee Gees songs played in the background. People wept openly, singing "How Deep Is Your Love," but behind the tributes and flowers, there was one last mystery, a note Robin reportedly wrote before he died, a personal message said to have been left with Duena. According to rumor, it expressed his love for both families and asked for unity after his passing. This has never been verified, but it has been mentioned in several fan forums and second-hand accounts by those close to the family. If true, it fits perfectly with the man he was, someone who, despite his mistakes, never stopped seeking harmony. Robin once said in a rare interview, "I don't fear death, I fear leaving things unsaid." And maybe that's why he kept writing music and poetry until the very end, because for him, silence was the one thing he couldn't live with. But what did his family finally say about those rumors? The open marriage, the affair, and the child he left behind? And how did they choose to protect his memory when the world tried to tear it apart? The final part of this story answers that and reveals how Robin's legacy turned from scandal back into song. In the months following Robin Gibb's death, his family faced two battles, one against grief and another against gossip. Newspapers revived the scandal, replaying every rumor, every headline about the affair, the daughter, and the so-called open marriage. But this time, something was different. The family stayed silent. No statements, no interviews, no public arguments. It wasn't denial, it was dignity. Duena Gibb, the woman who had been portrayed as the heartbroken wife, quietly stepped into the role of guardian, not just of his estate, but of his memory. She continued living in the Oxfordshire home they shared, where she still keeps his writing desk and music notebooks untouched. In rare interviews after his death, she chose her words carefully. She said Robin was complex, creative, and deeply loving, adding that his heart was too big for one lifetime. She never spoke harshly about Claire Yang, and perhaps that silence, that grace, was her way of closing the book without bitterness. As for Barry Gibb, the last surviving brother, he took to the stage again years later, performing Bee Gees classics in honor of his brothers. During one concert, he stopped between songs and said softly, "I miss Robin's laugh the most." No mention of scandal, no need to, because when it came to the Gibb family, love was always louder than rumor. Still, the tabloids couldn't resist one last claim, that Robin's will had left nothing to Claire Yang or Snow. That was partly true. Legal filings showed most of his estate went to Duena and his 3 elder children, while a separate trust fund was established for Snow. That's verified. It was Robin's way of balancing the scales, quietly, fairly, without fanfare. And when asked years later how she managed to forgive him, Duena's answer was simple, "I loved him, that was all." It was the kind of line you'd expect to hear in a Bee Gees song, but this time it wasn't sung. It was lived. The man who once wrote about too much heaven and how deep is your love left behind a life that mirrored both, filled with heaven and heartbreak, love and consequence. In the end, it wasn't the rumors or the mistakes that defined him. It was his music and the people who never stopped believing in it. Today, over a decade since Robin Gibb's passing, his legacy stands untouched by scandal. His songs continue to play on radio stations, in films, and in the hearts of fans who grew up hearing his falsetto drift through the 1970s airwaves. His wife, Duena, still lives quietly, often attending tribute events. His children, including Snow, have chosen privacy. The world rarely sees them, and that's exactly how Robin would have wanted it. Because Robin's real story was never about perfection. It was about humanity, about the contradictions that live inside every person who tries to love deeply while living publicly. The verified truth is simple. Robin Gibb had an affair that produced a child. He was forgiven by his wife. He spent his final years seeking peace and connection with his family. The rumors about a secret gay affair or a wild open marriage remain unconfirmed, fueled mostly by speculation, never by evidence. But here's what's undeniable. When Robin sang, every note carried emotion that couldn't be faked. And that emotion came from somewhere real, from a man who understood love not as an idea, but as a wound and a gift. In his final interview, Robin said, "I've had a wonderful life. I've made mistakes, but the music always forgave me." Maybe that's the truth he left behind. that the songs were his apology, his confession, and his redemption all at once. And as those melodies continue to echo long after his voice went silent, one thing is clear: Robin Gibb didn't just sing about love, he lived it, in all its chaos, courage, and contradiction. If this story moved you, don't let it fade with the last line, because here on RetroWaves, every legend still has something left to say. Hit like, subscribe, and share if you believe that even flawed love deserves to be remembered. And tell us in the comments, what do you think Robin's greatest song really said about him? Because sometimes the truth isn't in the headlines, it's hidden between the notes. And on RetroWaves, we listen closely.